what is more important, defense or attack? It's an eternal football question that has no definitive answer, and that's why it has its charms. Back in the 1950s, it seemed like attack, and only attack, could win matches and tournaments. But later, in the 1960s, the famous conception of catenaccio made the things more or less equal. On the other hand, in the middle of 1990s, there were serious concerns about the future of the game. It looked like the goals could disappear at all, and the spectacle is slowly and painfully dying. A low-scoring affair was more than usual case back at the time. But later, with the constant growth of speed of play and technique, the natural balance was reinstated. In this century, the pendulum continued to swing from side to side, although the fluctuations were minimal until the recent period, when defense visibly lost a big chunk of its importance after another leap in tempo of play and the inception of VAR. At first glance, the just concluded Champions League campaign reaffirmed this tendency. All the teams that were presented in the semi-final are playing in a good-looking and combinational football in their day-to-day practice. Obviously, at this stage of tournament and later, Chelsea and PSG appeared rather as a counter-attacking orientated sides, but it was strictly due to the strength of their opponents. In their usual practice, both these collectives are good in passing and improvisation, and this graphics definitely proves it. In the meantime, the goals per game ratio strangely dipped. The ultimate number, if we take the quarter-final stage as a starting point, was one of the lowest, not only for the last 4 years, but even for the previous 2 decades, and those stats really contradict this tendency. So why it happened and how it could be explained? Well, personally, I would like to allocate 2 main reasons. Firstly, let's not forget that the just completed football season has been largely influenced by the pandemic. It drastically affected the fixture, making it pretty packed and condensed. Basically, the teams had to play the same number of matches, having 1 month less, in some occasions, even without a legitimate winter break. Obviously, at some stage, fatigue took its toll, and it's logical that the effect was at its maximum, near to the end of the season. It's evident that with a lack of rest and preparation, even the best sides weren't as sharp and crisp in their offensive moves back in April and May. Also, it must be pointed out that this time almost nobody from the well-known and most respected providers of goals didn't participate in the quarter-final and the following stages of the Champions League. Cristiano Ronaldo, Luis Suarez and Lionel Messi have been eliminated earlier, along with their respective teams. Robert Lewandowski missed both matches against PSG through an injury. Therefore, only Kylian Mbappe had a chance to show his exceptional skills, but even he was visibly winded by May. No wonder that with such a deficit of stars, the number of goals dramatically decreased. It's significant that 3 semi-finalists out of 4 used to rely more on the structure of attacking play than on the individual brilliance. And if Karim Benzema has been completely indispensable at Real Madrid, both Chelsea and Manchester City, on their way to the final, had no dependable and obvious goal scorer playing up front as a cohesive unit. As usual, resilience and mobility were the name of the game. It's pretty telling that all 5 the most mobile players of the competition present 2 finalists. On the other hand, the teams with aging and had static stars were vulnerable more than ever. Barcelona with Messi and Atletico with Luis Suarez left the competition much earlier than they used and hoped. In comparison with them, Cristiano Ronaldo, who ran almost 10 kilometers per game, which is a regular distance for a player at that level, wasn't a burden to his team in this sense, but the Portuguese's mediocre work rate most certainly did hurt Juventus badly. As for the primarily defensively orientated teams, they haven't been able to reach the semi-final stage for the fourth season in a row. It's apparent that the purely pragmatic type of football is in a crisis, but it would be an exaggeration to say that it's close to death. Yes, Atletico spent another lackluster Champions League campaign, and Inter's season in Europe simply turned into a bust, but let's not forget that both these teams have won titles in their respective leagues. Moreover, in this case, exactly the manner of play was the catalyst for success. In the situation when the schedule was extremely tight and the weariness came quickly, Diego Simeone and Antonio Conte were magnificent in terms of physical preparation and not for the first time have proved themselves as truly great motivators. It would be unfair to say that Atletico played a better football than Real, quite the contrary. But Simeone surely outdid Zinedine Zidane in preserving his squad from injuries. Meanwhile, Conte easily outplayed and outclassed Andrea Pirlo if we talk about physical and mental preparation. It would be right to emphasize that the League One also provided a champion in the form of a team that mainly relies on a dependable defense. Lille historically plays in a pragmatic, in a way Italian football, and that's why the club became a bogey team for many powerful opponents. But with time the side of Christophe Galtier has sprung a surprise of a different caliber by beating the mighty and star-stacked PSG on the long distance. Indeed, the club from French capital fell victim of self-destruction, and this was the first and the most obvious reason of the loss. But Lille did a solid job too, especially on their half of the pitch, with the easily best defensive record. So the defensively orientated football is definitely alive and still could be pretty effective in some conditions, mainly on the long distance, when the stamina and mental strength are the big, if not the biggest factors. At the same time, the attacking football will almost certainly prevail in the Champions League playoff, where the maximum level of play is what counts the most. Anyway, this is the ever-changing process, and that's why it's so entertaining and unpredictable.